At first, we don't know we're being devalued. We just know something feels different. The person who once seemed fascinated by everything about us starts making little comments, a joke about the way we dress, a criticism disguised as advice, a compliment that somehow leaves us feeling smaller. And because it doesn't happen all at once, we don't immediately recognize what's happening. We tell ourselves they're stressed. Maybe we misunderstood. Maybe we're being too sensitive. Then the things they once said they loved about us start becoming problems. Our confidence becomes arrogance. Our independence becomes selfishness. Our sensitivity becomes weakness. The qualities they once celebrated are suddenly the very things they pick apart. Then come the comparisons. An ex was more fun. Someone else looks better. Someone else would understand them. And little by little, we begin feeling like we're competing for the affection that once seemed effortless. At the same time, they start pulling away. They're less available, more distant, more aloof. The warmth disappears. But strangely, while they're giving us less, they begin expecting more access to us, more explanations, more reassurance. They become jealous, demanding, possessive, and the relationship becomes increasingly confusing because we're being pushed away and controlled at the same time. Then there are the moments that seem to come out of nowhere. A perfectly good evening suddenly turns into rage. A simple disagreement becomes an attack. They humiliate us in front of other people and then tell us we can't take a joke. And afterward, sometimes they simply act like nothing happened. No apology, no accountability. We're expected to move on while our nervous system is still trying to understand what just happened. Eventually, we try to talk about it. We explain that we're hurt. We ask what changed. We ask for the kindness and connection we had in the beginning. And instead of being met with care, we may be mocked, berated, blamed, or told that our reaction is the real problem. That is what makes devaluation so difficult to recognize. It rarely begins with one dramatic moment. It happens gradually enough that we keep trying to fix what we think is a relationship problem. But healing begins when we understand that their changing treatment of us was never a measurement of our worth. It was part of a cycle. Just when we think we've met our person, the devaluation begins, and most of us don't recognize it at first. One of the most damaging parts of devaluation is that, little by little, it can teach us to abandon ourselves. And most of us have no idea that's what's happening. At first, we're simply trying to get the relationship back to the way it was in the beginning. So when the little criticisms start, we adjust. When the jokes hurt, we laugh anyway. When they tell us we're too sensitive, we start questioning whether we are. When they become distant, we give them more space. When they accuse us of not caring enough, we give them more attention. And without realizing it, we begin changing ourselves around their reactions. We stop bringing up certain subjects because we know they'll get angry. We choose our words more carefully. We monitor their mood before we decide whether it's safe to talk. We stop asking for things because somehow our needs always become an argument. And eventually, keeping the peace can become more important than telling the truth about how we feel. That is one of the ways devaluation changes us. The relationship slowly becomes organized around their emotions, their anger, their jealousy, their disappointment, their needs, and ours start taking up less and less space. We may even become proud of how much we can tolerate, how patient we are, how understanding we are, how quickly we can forgive. But there is a difference between compassion and repeatedly abandoning ourselves to keep someone else comfortable. Healthy relationships do not require us to shrink in order to remain loved. They don't require us to constantly monitor someone's mood. And they don't punish us for having boundaries, needs, opinions, or feelings of our own. That's why understanding devaluation matters, because sometimes the biggest sign isn't simply how they're treating us. It's noticing what we've started doing to ourselves in response. Are we speaking less, apologizing more, explaining ourselves constantly, walking on eggshells, trying harder while receiving less? Those changes matter because devaluation doesn't only change how they see us. Over time, it can change how we see ourselves. And healing begins when we start taking back the pieces of ourselves we learned to silence just to survive the relationship. By the time many of us recognize devaluation, we've already spent months trying to understand what changed. Because it rarely looks like one dramatic shift. It looks like inconsistency. The affection is still there sometimes. The compliments still happen sometimes. There may still be good days, and that's exactly what keeps us hoping the relationship can go back to what it was. But there are signs the dynamic has changed. We start receiving less warmth and more criticism. Conversations that once felt easy become tense. We notice that we're explaining ourselves more, defending ourselves more, apologizing for things we never used to apologize for. They may begin comparing us to other people, withholding affection, acting bored or irritated by things they once loved about us. Our needs start feeling inconvenient to them. Our boundaries become arguments. Our questions become accusations. And when we bring up something that hurt us, the conversation somehow ends with us defending our character instead of discussing their behavior. That shift matters. Another sign is that the relationship begins feeling conditional. We feel close when we're agreeable. We feel loved when we're easy. We feel safe when we don't challenge anything. But when we disagree, ask questions, or expect accountability, the warmth disappears. So we begin chasing it. We try to recreate the beginning. We become more accommodating, more patient, more careful. And meanwhile, they may be emotionally withdrawing, creating distance, rewriting the relationship, or already looking elsewhere for attention and validation. That's why recognizing devaluation before a discard matters, not because every distant partner is preparing to leave, and not because every difficult season means narcissistic abuse. It's the pattern we're looking at. Criticism, withdrawal, control, humiliation, blame shifting, punishment for speaking up, and a growing sense that we have to earn the basic care that once seemed freely given. One of the clearest signs is how we feel inside the relationship. We're no longer asking, "Do I feel loved here?" We're asking, "What do I need to do so they'll love me the way they used to?" That question tells us something has changed. Healing begins when we stop chasing the beginning long enough to look clearly at what the relationship has become. Because devaluation is not something we fix by becoming easier to love. It is something we learn to recognize before we lose more of ourselves trying. If devaluation taught us to question ourselves, healing teaches us to come home to ourselves again. We begin by remembering that we were never too much. We were never too sensitive. We were never too difficult to love. We were responding to a relationship that kept changing the rules. A relationship that gave us warmth, then withdrew it. Closeness, then distance. Praise, then criticism. And over time, many of us started measuring our worth by how they treated us. Healing asks us to stop doing that. Their criticism was not a definition of us. Their withdrawal was not proof that we were unlovable. Their rage was not proof that we deserved less. Their inability to love us consistently was never evidence that there was something wrong with us. Devaluation was part of the cycle. And once we understand that, we can stop chasing the version of ourselves we thought would finally be enough for them. We can start becoming enough for ourselves again. We can speak without shrinking, feel without apologizing, set boundaries without believing we're cruel. And slowly we begin rebuilding the trust in ourselves that the cycle tried to take from us. Healing does not mean forgetting what happened. It means what happened no longer gets to decide who we are. We are still here. And little by little, we are finding our way back to ourselves.